I'm Monique Soltani. I'm a wine expert, a journalist, and I'm thirsty for life. This is Wino TV, where culture... We always hear about 97s when it comes to Napa Valley, but you didn't break out any for me. What happened? Gotta have a national syndicated show. And agriculture come together. Long before there was Screaming Eagle or Scarecrow, BV released Napa Valley's very first Colt Cabernet way back in 1940. We are sitting down for an epic tasting of rare releases. I've got General Manager and Chief Winemaker of BV Vineyards, Trevor Durling, here with me. Hey, Trevor, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I was supposed to be here a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was a month ago now. I don't know. But my daughters got sick, and you guys were so nice to reschedule because I totally no-showed on you. So this is fantastic. It was all a part of my master plan to get my own private tasting with you, Trevor. I said BV when we started, but the proper pronunciation is...
Beaulieu Vineyard.
Beaulieu Vineyard, and that means beautiful land or beautiful. Tell us a little bit about the history of the winery.
Yeah, so Beaulieu was established in 1900. It's actually one of the longest running wineries here in the Napa Valley, still standing today. It made its way through the Prohibition era by actually making sacramental wines for the Catholic Church, and I heard an interesting story that it basically quadrupled in size during that time.
The Catholic Church did, or the wine?
The winery.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe more people want to join the church because the wine was so good.
They remained very profitable through that time. And 1936 came along. It was one of the big vintages for us here. A big event happened there, which was the first vintage of the George de la Tour Private Reserve, which we're going to taste the 2013 a little bit later today.
1940, you put the first Napa Valley Colt Cab on the map.
Yep.
And what is a Napa Valley Colt Cab for people at home that don't really know?
Colt Cab, the way that I would describe it, it really leaves an impression and is something that gets really put on a big map, right? So something that might not be widely available to absolutely anybody and everybody, but it's relatively selective and something that is really known for a sense of place and really the highest quality possible.
And usually the highest price possible, right?
That goes along with it.
Yeah, there's the whole cha-ching factor. I'm pretty excited because one of the things that I love to tell people, whether it's Thanksgiving, birthday, holidays, is to pick out a special, meaningful vintage that means something to you and kind of bring it to the table and share it with your family and friends. And not every day do we get a chance to try some of these rare vintages. And you guys here at BV, you actually provide this to the general public, correct?
We do, because I think it's one of the things that makes this winery so special is that we have access to these old vintages, and you can really go through a lot of history and a whole timeline, and just see how wine has changed over years.
Let's get started. Less talking, more drinking. Trevor, what are we starting with?
So let's go ahead and start with the 1999 George de la Tour Private Reserve.
1999 flashback. Pocatello, Idaho. That's where I got my first TV news job, and I signed the contract, and we're all worried about Y2K, and we're doing all these Y2K stories. What was happening in Napa Valley in 1999?
So 1999 was a really good vintage, actually. It was kind of a contrast to the 98, which we'll taste in a second, also considered to be a very good vintage, but it was much drier. So fairly long, cool springtime. Low rainfall during the growing season, and what that ended up creating was a situation where we had long hang times. So the clusters remained on the vines for an extended period of time, which helped to develop some incredible concentration. So a very moderate year overall.
And I don't even know if you were alive in 1999, Trevor, but were they worried about the Y2K thing here?
We certainly were worried about the Y2K thing. Actually, I was a senior in high school that year.
Okay, so I'm not that much older than you, Trevor. Not that much older. We always hear about 97s when it comes to Napa Valley, but you didn't break out any for me. What happened? Gotta have a national syndicated show.
Actually, so the sevens are to, 97, 07, and we're hoping 17 will be a fantastic vintage. And I think, it's interesting because you have the 99 and the 98 here, which I think did a little bit of a better job being more age-worthy than what we had. I think the 97s were great right out of the gate, but they're not seeming to hold on as long as these vintages are.
So you guys already drank them all?
We already drank them all.
They're all good. Yeah, that's a real story, Trevor. And we'll move on to the 98.
So 1998 Clone 6 Cabernet. So this is one of the wines that we really make only for the tasting tasting room here at Beaulieu. It's a very small bottling. Typically, we're around 500 cases of the clones. So Clone 6, the way that I best describe it is it's kind of like a mountain fruit grown on the valley floor. So it's a specific, clone of Cabernet that'll be different from some of the others that we work with. It actually originated and was called the Jackson clone. So it started in Jackson, California, in the Sierra foothills. And we've isolated it and have quite a bit planted throughout our vineyards. And it's meant to give big body and structure. And we want to have a special bottling of it to kind of show the differences.
Yeah, I can feel that big body and structure on my mouth still. How do you save a bottle of wine that long? What's the secret to laying it down?
The secret to laying it down is definitely consistent temperature. So whether or not, it's exactly at 60 degrees or whatever it is, the most important thing is that you don't have a lot of fluctuation. And obviously, the bottle needs to be laid on its side as well to keep the cork moist. But as long as you have a relatively consistent temperature, you don't have pressure changes within the bottle that can move the cork, and that's really the key.
Trevor, when does this start to go down? When does it peak and when does it go where you just drink it?
Yeah, I think, we're kind of in the sweet spot right now. I think that because of the tannin structure that I'm tasting, this wine still has another decade of life for those that really want to hang on to it. But I would suggest opening it up and drinking it because I think it's hitting its peak right now. And
that's when you're so scared, right? Like anyone who's been saving onto a bottle of wine, whether it's a meaningful bottle or just meaningful because you've had it for so long, what advice do you give to someone? Just open it, pull the cork. That's the fear of it, opening the bottle.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that the special moment is now. You create that special moment around the wine, right? So no better time to open the 98 than right now, I don't think.
Yeah, just go home on a Wednesday, turn on the old Wino TV at 8:30 and pull out your, 1998 bottle of God knows what. The next year we have is 2005.
2005, so now we're going to try the Clone 4 Cabernet. The 05 vintage was actually a really good year, so pretty big yield. It was one of those years where we had a heavy crop and also very high quality, which isn't always the case. One of my favorite vintages that I've ever experienced in my career, actually, so really nice stuff. The Clone 4, this is a little bit different from the Clone 6 in the way that actually this clone was isolated in the Mendoza, Argentina area. It's a little bit of a larger cluster, slightly larger berries, not quite as tannic as what you'd sometimes see with the Clone 6.
And Trevor, what is a clone?
So a clone is just basically a specific type of Cabernet that's been isolated depending on the region that it's been grown in and how that's adapted to its environment, and they'll have certain tendencies that stay with it genetically. So you can plant a variety of clones within a vineyard, which is a bunch of different types of Cabernet, basically, that grow differently, have different characteristics in terms of yield, tannin quantity, things like that.
If the 1998 is ready to drink right now before it goes down the other way, how long can we hold on to the 2005 for?
I'd say, depending on either the region that it was grown, but a Napa Valley Cabernet, if it's stored properly, can age at least another 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, 10 more years. So remember, the secret to storing properly is just regulating the temperature.
Absolutely. Consistent temperature. Make sure that you hold the bottles on their side to keep the corks wet. Because if you keep it upright for too long, they'll dry out, and then you have air. Basically, you're trying to prevent air from infiltrating through the cork.
Okay, so if they're set upright like these bottles are here, then the wine is not going to touch the cork, and then in theory the cork dries out and air can seep through. Is that what we're saying?
Correct, because the cork itself will lose its integrity. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a piece of wood, remember, right? So if it dries out, it's going to change form a little bit, and then you might have little pockets of oxygen that can come through. But by keeping it on its side, that'll keep the cork wet, so it stays expanded, and it doesn't allow the air to infiltrate through the cork.
Gosh, you got so many pro tips. I love it. Next, we are trying, another meaningful year. 2012, got married in the Napa Valley. I can't believe it was almost 5 years ago, 2012.
We picked this one on purpose for you.
Did you? Thank you so much. You did not know.
No, so 2012 was another really good vintage. Yeah. A little bit larger than average, I would say, coming off of a very wet year that we had in 2011. We had relatively normal rainfall, and then the years following 2012, we actually got into a drought situation, which we'll taste in the 2013, which further concentrated the fruit, which was actually a pretty good thing at that time. But 2012, pretty moderate growing season, fairly cool, relatively long hang time, and you have wines that are very fruit forward and have kind of a soft tannin structure to make it they're approachable right now to enjoy, but will still age fairly well.
And then next we have a Clone 6 2012, so the first was the Clone 4, now this one's the Clone 6.
Yeah, so this will be, the direct comparison within the same vintage of, the two different clones. And you'll notice a fairly big difference. Again, Clone 6 is a wine that tends to be a little bit more structured and tannic than the Clone 4. And so this really has, I'd say, a bit more ageability than the Clone 4 would because of those tannins. And remember, that's kind of one of the things that helps to allow for the ageability of a wine.
Yeah. It's so interesting because what we are trying here, they're all Cabernets and they're all from different years and the different clones. And when you try the clones side by side, you hear numbers like 4 and 6 and it doesn't really mean anything. And then you taste them side by side and you go, wow, you really can tell the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole idea behind bottling two separate types of clones is to allow the consumer to really understand the difference in the two and understand also that when we bottle something like the Georges de la Tour, which we're going to taste the 2013 in a second, we're using a combination of those different clones. So at the end of the day, the way that I describe it to people is it's kind of like cooking, right? When you're cooking, you don't want to just have salt and that's all you have. You want to have a number of different spices and different ingredients to cook with to make your final dish. And that's the way that I look at winemaking, right? So we have a number of different components and tools to make our final blend.
The last, of course, we have is the 2013, which was the drought. I guess 2012 we were a little bit drought, but 2013 we really started.
Yeah, but 13 was the first year that we really started to see some of the effects of that, and ultimately that lasted through really 2016 almost. But 13 was a vintage where we had a little bit of a lower yield than 2012, but honest to God, this is the best vintage that I have ever seen in my entire career. And so I'm going into my 16th harvest in the industry. And the 2013 was fantastic. It's one of those rare cases where you have ageability, but also approachability, which doesn't always happen. So the wines are very concentrated, but the quality of the tannin and the body of the wine allows for early drinking if you want. So this is just a baby. This is something that'll last 20, 25 years if you want it to, but it's also very pleasant to drink right now.
So all you people at home that are looking to get your hands on a hot Napa Valley vintage, hot, not, pardon the pun, epic Napa Valley vintage, 2013 is the one for you, the epic pick.
Let me put it this way. I am personally buying a lot of 13s to store in my cellar for years to come.
See, I've been buying these stupid 2012s because it's my wedding year. Now I forget about
12s are awesome as well.
Yeah, nothing happened in 2013. Too bad. Buy it because it's an epic year. That's the reason to buy the wine. We're talking a lot about vintages. What's going on 2017 wise?
2017 is looking really good. So we're officially out of the drought this year, which is fantastic.
For all kinds of reasons. Yeah.
For all kinds of reasons. So we got a good amount of rainfall throughout the winter and spring. In a certain way, we had so much rainfall that the groundwater stayed in much later than it normally would. The good news about that is we've had a heat spell over the last month that's helped to kind of evaporate some of that groundwater, and now we're kind of cruising into harvest. So the weather's been very moderate. Today's in the upper 80s, which is exactly what we want to see. So I think it'll be a vintage where we have good hang time. So it's probably a week behind what we experienced last year, and things are shaping up very nicely. It's those sevens. The last couple of sevens have been very good vintages.
And a 3 thrown in for good measure, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a cheers or a toast? Anything you say? I'm going to pick up the 98 for my college year. Cheers or a toast, Trevor?
Sure, yeah. Cheers. Thank you for joining, and really fun to taste the wines with you, and keep drinking wine, everybody.
Pull that cork. Don't be afraid to pull the cork, people.
The time is now.